Hi everyone, my name is Kimberly Roselle, and today I'd like to share with you my presentation on fatigue in aviation, the hidden threat in flying. Individuals as well as organizations often ignore the problem until an accident occurs. So up until today, aviation and air travel has been growing at a steady rate. The demand for quick and easy travel across the globe has only been increasing in popularity until where it's reached this point today at an all-time high. So airlines need more pilots, pilots are working longer hours, and the workload that has been placed on pilots has definitely been growing, which can be an area of concern, but luckily the regulations and laws that are in place really helps that cause and make sure that all pilots that do come up and report for duty are in a safe condition to fly at all times. However, the area of aviation that we're going to focus in on today is actually general aviation. And in general aviation, people are flying for fun, therefore they don't have the same regulations and protections that professional pilots do. So to talk a little bit more about general aviation, it's a lesser known part of aviation to the public, however, it's just as essential. So like I said, general aviation pilots in general, they fly for fun, they like to own their own planes or they rent, but it can also include things such as flight training or small flight operations such as aerial photography or crop dusting for farmers. Now this area of pilots, typically for the most part they're a one-man crew. They don't have a two-man crew like normal airline pilots, so they're especially vulnerable to fatigue, and this can be a quite concern to us. Some of the side effects of fatigue are actually quite dangerous, and we'll go through them here together. So we've got loss of concentration, decreased performance, memory loss, and poor decision-making skills. And it's no wonder why any number of these things could be a very unwelcome side effect while flying. Side effects continued. We also include an increased reaction time, irritability, fixation. And fixation is a bad one because a big part of flying is the ability to multitask and to divert your attention quickly to many things at once, because it doesn't take long for one thing to get out of hand. So if you're focusing on one thing, what could be a small problem can easily escalate to a large problem. And then on the list we also have increased vulnerability to physical ailments, which in a perfect world you wouldn't be flying in with anyway, but sometimes people make those choices and then fatigue just adds to the fire. Now what I'd like to highlight right now is the most dangerous effect of fatigue is a person's inability to recognize it. Studies show that people consistently underrate how tired they are and that they're not able to see it within themselves, which is obviously quite dangerous because if you can't recognize it, you can't stop it and fix it. To speak further on the effects of fatigue in aviation, we can look a little bit about the statistics out there. A significant number of accidents do report fatigue as a contributing factor. And when we look at general aviation specifically, only 10% happens at night. However, 10% of general aviation accidents that have happened at night. Now this is quite meaningful because night flying is quite demanding. It takes quite a lot of attention. However, after long days of work or school, general aviation pilots are tired and less aware at a point in time where they should be their most aware. Some of the causes of fatigue we should be aware of in today's world, number one being sleep deprivation. And it's consistently underrated and underappreciated because only just 2 hours of sleep loss is the equivalent of 0.05% blood alcohol content. And when this is translated into drivers per se, this is actually over the legal amount in more than a few countries and actually increases your chances of an accident 11 times over a sober driver. 11 times. So that's huge. And down the list we have sickness, like I said, like a head cold, a stomach flu, even something as small as that can make a big difference, as well as insomnia, sleep apnea, depression, and medication. And when we talk about medication, obviously we're talking about prescription pills, but we're also talking about as something as simple and innocuous as an over-the-counter cough syrup per se, because many cough syrups have a side effect of drowsiness. Some other causes that we would like to highlight here is the ones that are more self-inflicted, that we have a lot of control over, but still happen anyway, such as personal and work stress, caffeine and alcohol use, late nights, and travel and time zone change, which don't affect personal general aviation pilots as much as airline pilots, but it's still worthy to mention. And one of the largest contributing issues here to fatigue in aviation is actually aviation culture itself. For example, half of airline pilots have reported that fatigue is not taken seriously by airlines. This means that professional pilots themselves don't feel that their own employers take that problem seriously enough. So you can imagine how general aviation pilots feel as well. There's quite a large pressure on them to perform no matter what the situation may be. And this ties into the typical pilot personality, which really helps you understand the whole issue of fatigue in general. Pilots are very reluctant to say no, and they have a very macho behavior. They like to overstate their personal abilities, and they tend to be overly optimistic of the outcome of their flight. So all of these things can definitely contribute to the perfect storm, and no one accident is typically made from one mistake. It's a chain of mistakes that happen to be in a row, and when you're under the influence of fatigue, it's very difficult as a pilot to recognize and then stop those mistakes from happening and breaking that chain. Now, with all of that in mind, now that we know that fatigue is so dangerous, how can we prevent it? One acronym that is great to know is called the I'm Safe acronym. So going down the list here, we've got illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and emotion. Now, emotion is an interesting one because people don't typically think about it. But if you're overly stressed, angry, sad, or whatever the main case may be, if you're distracted in any way, that is a wonderful reason to cancel a flight that day. Now remember, the main thing to take away from this presentation is keeping aviation as safe as possible is a duty that all pilots must share equally. It is our responsibility as pilot in command to make sure we are at our best condition to fly in at all times, whatever that may be for us. Now that concludes my presentation on fatigue in aviation, and I hope you learned a little bit, and if you have any questions and concerns, please let me know below. Thank you.